Hello, I'm Mish, and I invite you in today to be inspired, invigorated, and nourished. This podcast, in her own way, is for women who are ready to empower themselves to live an aligned life that is unapologetic, rich, and radiant. An open discussion that is transparent about the struggles, tips, and stories of women who have come to live in their own truth, power, and sense of self. I'm absolutely thrilled that you're here and with me on this journey. When I think of those pivotal moments in my life as an entrepreneur and as a woman, I think about the people or the experiences that helped formulate those changes in my path. And one of those people was Quinn Curtis. I signed up for her program Inflow and On Fire about 6 months ago, and holy moly guacamole, my life was completely uprooted and changed. It was one of the best investments I've ever made in my career, both professionally and personally, and I'm so grateful that we have her today. Just to introduce you really briefly to Quinn, she is someone who helps dreamers turn their dreams into reality by leveraging soulful magnetic branding. Through the work together with her, she helps them get out of their own way to create a life that they love and a business that totally rocks. Her genius zone is definitely Inflow and On Fire. She also has branding online courses as well. But what Quinn talks about is really just a process of detoxing from hustle, detoxing from living a life that was somebody else's or that you thought that you had to lead, and what that journey feels like and how that's impacted her on every level of her life and how she's now into flow. You guys, this is such a treat. I hope you enjoy every single second of it as much as I did. Well, hello, Quinn. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I know. Man, it's so funny. I remember getting to know you. Well, I didn't actually know you. I just saw you on videos doing some training probably about 3 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, I love her. She's so awesome. And then I think I stalked you at doTERRA's convention last year at the dinner, like when big, fangirl moment, and you're like trying to like eat food because you have like 5 minutes. So it's like in between eating, like bread rolls and pasta. And I was just like, I just want to tell you that I adore you. You're probably like, who is this girl? And then we connected through your amazing program called Inflow and On Fire, which hands down, top 5 best personal development things I've ever done in my life, worth every penny plus more. And I wanted to have you on because, there's so much we could talk about your life, but that's, you talk about whatever you want. But what I totally respect about you, Quinn, and I want the audience to know, is that what you're doing right now has taken so much courage and so much transformation. And as we were talking about earlier, so many of us have skill, but we don't have courage. And I was just like, I want to exalt you in that, because coaching with you and watching you over the last year has been so affirming for me. So I want everyone to know who you are. That's why I have you on this podcast.
Holy smokes, that's so sweet. And I'm kind of speechless. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, really, that means so much to me. Truly.
So tell us a bit about yourself. I mean, it's more than a 20-minute podcast, but I guess just kind of the long and the short. You've got, is it 5 kiddos?
Mm-hmm.
And one boy in the middle? No, on the front.
Yeah, my son's the oldest, and he's 12, and my youngest is going to be turning 6. So doing the math, I had 6 pregnancies, 1 miscarriage, 6 pregnancies over years.
Wow.
It doesn't even seem mathematically possible, but we did it. So nuts.
You tick the breeder box, like tick.
Like we nailed that. We just owned it.
Totally owned it. You're like, if I'm gonna nail it, I'm just gonna go like big guns in this area. Good on you. So you had your kids.
Yes.
And you're a graphic designer, creative kind of at heart.
Yeah, definitely always an artist at heart. I was actually going to go to, I even had like a scholarship on its way to lining up to a fashion design school. That was
Ah,
my passion. I was so excited about that, but had a lot of voices in my world that talked me out of that and said that that wasn't a respectable career for a mom and a woman, especially, you know, a faith-based woman. And so instead got talked into the medical world where I was going to be a nurse and then maybe a surgeon at some point. And it was fine for a while. And it just wasn't, you know, I'm a creative person. Like, I'm an artist. It just never was the right fit. So it ended up creating a lot of like emotional instability in just all of this being pulled, not where my heart was wanting to go, but where I was feeling pushed to go and where I had to go to be a good wife, a good mom, a good person. Right. Well, and mom wasn't even on the table at the time because I was diagnosed with a really severe case of manic depressiveness. So serious anxiety and depression where they said I'd never have kids. So I was just like trying to make it. And anyways, ended up sticking it to the man and saying, I don't want to live this life anymore of being on $2,400 of medication a month and basically being like a walking vegetable that can't feel things and that feels numb all the time. And it's not taking away the pain, but I'm not living the life that I felt like I was born to live. Right. And so I went off medication really carefully and strategically and got pregnant with my first baby. And we started having babies, but then we jumped into a bunch of financial struggle where my husband, he's amazing, but he wasn't ever like in that role or even like knew what to do with really providing really well for us. So then I started to do some of these artistic creative pieces on the side, just trying to help bring in some more money into our world. But it ended up being like, oh my gosh, this is my badassery, if I can say that.
yeah.
But like, this is my zone of genius, like business and creativity and graphic design, photography, creative directing, brand strategy. Like it all came together. And so it's been such a fun journey, fun now, like in hindsight, you know, there were a lot of hard moments, but fun now to be so much in my genius zone and to be in a space where, you know, like I kind of felt guilty about wanting to be in my genius zone before. And what I didn't understand is that me getting in my genius zone would automatically give everyone in my world permission to be in theirs. And so what comes of that is just magic.
I love that. So you, just to kind of get people up to speed of where you are now. So you were like, well, I mean, there's, it's like your life in 5 minutes. It's like, so let's go even faster. So you basically were doing some creative artwork for a company, and then you decided to, was it a year and a half ago, kind of switch?
A lot of time in corporate. Yeah. So it was like doing my own thing. And then it got brought into the corporate world. And the way that happened was pretty miraculous too, because basically the CEOs that brought me in, they said, we want more of your time. How do we buy you out? Like, how do we buy out all your working hours? Wow. How do we replace your husband's income so that he can be at home? Because we were homeschooling at the time. And like, how do we just have more of you? So I was like, you know, in my mind at that time, I felt like I was the belle of the ball and I'd won the lottery. And so we just went all in. And I just worked for, 3 to 4 years, like at minimum 40 hours a week would be a good week. But at most it was like 60-hour weeks. There were times when it, like, especially during a lot of the press deadlines, where I was like sleeping at my CEO's house and like waking up after 2 hours to hurry and get back to the computer. And so it created major adrenal fatigue. And so then it's been almost 2 years ago that I ended up having such severe health problems. At least it was really scaring me. Like, my heart was I was having a ton of palpitations. And my grandpa, he died of heart attacks. He had multiple all his life. And I just really felt him come to me very strongly multiple times over a couple months and just say, Quinn, like, this is not your path. Like, get off. Don't do this anymore. This doesn't lead to where you want to go. And so I ended up making the terrifying choice to give up, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in bonuses, in commissions on top of my really healthy salary, and the opportunity to be on stage in their arena, the opportunity to, be flown to their retreats and to speak and to be a major influencer in that world. I was really faced with the choice of, I have to leave it, because what was really surprising to me is that it was an atmosphere where it was, very pro-family and pro-mission based, and purpose-based. But at the end of the day, it was like sacrifice everything, like continually the Abrahamic trial of putting your family and putting your health on the altar, and then God's going to save you at the last minute kind of stuff. And I just had to decide, that wasn't my God. That wasn't my version of what God wanted me to do. And it was a major pull where I had overworking so much. I had really given so much of my own intuition and power over to the people that I was working with, and felt like, well, they're more spiritual because they have more money and they have more influence. So they maybe know more than me. And so I kept shoving my little voice inside that was like telling me, no, like, this is not you. This is not your path. And it was literally one of the scariest decisions I've ever made. Totally. And it shut me down. It took a good year of healing, because I had gone totally into workaholism and felt like an alcoholic having to avoid the bar, because I just couldn't trust myself with work. I couldn't trust that I could have healthy boundaries. I couldn't trust that I could find meaning in my life or in who I was outside of that arena anymore. I had lost myself completely. So it was a long walk in the dark and the wilderness after leaving that. And then, of course, you were trying to catch me up. Now I've created my own things, and it's
in that. I mean, when we talk about like one or two pivotal moments, that would have been that time when you had those messages spoken into you of like, okay, there would have been times before where you look back and think, okay, well, that moment when that opportunity was given to you was a pivotal moment, because it gave you this ability to unearth your creativity because they were asking you to do it, but it also unearthed this addiction, a workaholism. We have similar-ish paths, different methods down the track, but we got on the same wagon. And my addiction manifested in workaholism and binge eating disorder. And now I'm dealing with adrenal fatigue. And so I guess what I love about your story, and I think there's so many women and men who need to just have the permission to say you don't need to work all the time. And it's definitely not as profound in Australia. Like, they're very happy to take, and in fact, it's okay to take 4 weeks off. Like, as a nurse, you have 6 weeks of holiday a year if you're full-time working. So, because they have shift work allowance here on top of vacation, on top of sick leave, on top of carers leave, on top of stress leave, like it's so protected here. So, I could just say, I'm taking the month of January off, or I want to take 4 weeks to go back home to see my family. And it would be no questions asked. And there would be no expectation that you'd work when you're at home. And after 7 years, most places give you 10 weeks of additional leave. It's called long service leave. So you can take 4 months paid off, or sometimes you can take 8 months half pay, depending on your employer. So, and that's every 7 years. So if you work there 14 years, you get another 10 weeks. If you work there 21 years, et cetera. Yeah. So in America, my dad's worked for the same company for, I don't even know, 35, 40 years. And I think they get 2 weeks a year off. So it's just a culture too, where I think an American culture is that you work until the job's done. And if it requires 80 hours a week for 20 years, then you work 80 hours a week for 20 years. But what that is, and I was listening to it last night when we were at church, and it was really good. He said, just because you have all the things doesn't mean that you're free. I think that's what you realized, was that just because you had the money coming in and your family was secure by what looked on paper secure and the bank account secure, didn't mean that your soul was free.
Yep.
And we struggle with that because we're told to be financially secure, which we need to be mindful of. And it's just kind of a metaphorical question of like, at what point are you willing to sacrifice your soul for that?
Right. and recognizing that we're always chasing this feeling of safety. And so that was what kept me hooked so long, is it was always, well, the next project completion is what's going to make it so you're safe, right?
Yeah.
And then I was in this world also where I was just mentoring people who were, making 50 to 200,000 or more a month, and still they didn't feel safe. They still felt like, I just have to reach that next income goal and then I'll be safe. I'll be able to relax. I'll be able to spend time with my kids. And so I just started to look around and saw, oh my gosh, this is insanity. It will never stop when we look outside of us to find that safety. And so I just had to let it go. Yeah.
So walk me,
let it go too, because you kind of hope that it really will work for you. Like, I think that's why most people are stuck, because you get in too deep and you're like, no, I've already given 20 years of my life to this. I've already given 40 hours a week for however long to this. It's going to pay off. We're going to have the dream. But it really doesn't. It's so sad. And then you just get to the next.
Or you're in, or, they know me as this, they know me as that, they know me as this.
Right.
I've sold all of these, these business workshops on this, and now I'm walking away from it. I mean, I've had to deal with the same thing. Like, I'm just thinking, okay, so how can I gracefully just transition where people don't feel like they've been robbed? But you get to the point where you've talked a lot about this idea of kind of in her own way. What I love about you in that sense of like, what does in her own way mean to you? I'm just speaking from my own observations of you. So you can say, of course, whatever you want. But for me, one of the biggest takeaways for in her own way that you have given me, and I'll take with me for the rest of my life, is this idea of seasons. Intentional, because I think what happens is that people think that it's either all or nothing. It's either work 80 hours and be secure, or you live in a cardboard box under the bridge. Like, I think that they think that there is no in between. There is no pendulum in the sweet spot in the middle. It's either one or the other. It's either you're an influencer or you're a nobody. It's like, well, that's just silly, but that's what you call it both an and, or either or. So you call it the either or, and we need to live in the both and and. But I love this idea of seasons. Mm-hmm. Because it gives us permission to be in harvest when we need to be in harvest, but also gives us permission to be in intentional rest. When you decided, Quinn, to go from, I call it drinking the Kool-Aid, to going, I'd just like a glass of water, thanks. And you kind of push that away. Can you talk about that transition? Because I feel like that wisdom for you, because it's not as raw for you anymore, that wisdom of going through that transition is the reason why people don't, because they're absolutely terrified of the darkness. They're terrified of, changing boundaries. They're terrified of everything. It feels like an atomic bomb fallout, to be honest. It feels like, bang, it's there, and now you've got to clean up the whole mess. But can you just talk about that transition and the things that helped you get through that?
Yeah, there were a couple of things. The first was Joseph Campbell. He talked about, in one of his books that I read, about how in some indigenous cultures, when somebody would start to exhibit symptoms of what we would say would be schizophrenia, that the people would bring that person, that child or whomever, to the medicine man. And they would know that that medicine man would help that person get through it. And when the person got on the other side, they would then be prepared to then be the teacher to the tribe and be the medicine man. So it was I just kept thinking of that over and over again. Like, I am crazy. I feel like I am crazy because no one else sees this. Nobody else values it. Nobody's supporting it. Everybody looks at me like I'm crazy. Right. And so I just had to stick with that, like, trust on the other side. There will be, I might be able to teach or help somebody else, And Joseph Campbell likens this to, when those mental crazy moments happen, that's like being thrown out into the water and not knowing how to swim. And he said that the medicine man, and connecting them with that piece, was giving them someone who could teach them how to swim out there.
Love it.
So that was the piece that I felt like, as I looked around at my life and then at those around me, as I just felt like, we're already drowning. we already are, we're just trying to keep our heads above water. There's not enough support in the water to figure out how to swim through this. So you're right. It's scary shit. Like there is no doubt about it. It's a dark soul. It's so scary because it's tearing away your safety. It's tearing away the illusion of safety. I mean, for, maybe you aren't a fan of Karl Marx. I don't know that a lot of people are, but he said something really fascinating about him.
Let's go deep and philosophical here, shall we, Quinn? Just like all the philosophers and people. I'm like, thank God I did philosophy at university. I know who she's talking about.
Well, these were just some of the voices, but he said that religion is the great opiate of society. And if they didn't have religion, there would be uprisings and societies would change.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like, whatever that, I don't want to make a blanket statement and say all religion is the Kool-Aid, but that's what work had become to me. It had become a religion. It had become like such a higher purpose kind of a thing, which was not in alignment at that point, right? It had come at the expense of my own heart and soul, my own joy, because I was trying to measure up to this other thing. So that it really is, there's withdrawals. Just like coming off of any drug, there's a withdrawal period. And it was heartbreaking. So, but that piece, that piece really helped me, just keeping thinking of that. But the other that helped me was really, I think, having all of those babies, right? Like I have done pregnancy and birth every way that you can. And so the divine just really knew, okay, she understands that. Like, let's help her bring this in. So it was like, I would think, okay, I should be feeling better by now. I should be back in the game. And the divine would remind me of moments in my pregnancies where I had tried to make birth happen faster, right? Or I had even tried to do whatever I could to force it out, or it just craziness, and how that didn't create the birth happening faster. It created more pain, right? So it was just this, that's what I feel like you find in the wilderness, is you refine your connection with the divine and with your own heart and soul, because we lose even our ability to really recognize and trust those voices. We just, that's the terrifying part, is everything else is so much louder around us, and so it's easier to trust. And so then it feels like that dark night of the soul, that is your divine tutoring time. And it is like a Gethsemane in a lot of ways. Right? It's a lot of.
What do you wish that female entrepreneurs would do more? That wasn't one of the questions I sent to you, but
no, I wish.
When it comes to when it comes to In Her Own Way, like if you had the loudspeaker and there were 35,000 people in the stadium, what is the permission that you feel women need to just hitch their wagons to more?
Trust your path. Your path. Your path with your business is going to look different than anybody else's, and that's perfect. Right? Trust the rhythm that is in your soul, right? Trust the music that you're hearing. Trust the dreams that are in your heart, right? Like so often we're just looking outside of us and gut checking by looking at everybody else, and it's totally, it is damning, like literally damning, because it stops you from showing up and serving and making this world a better place like you were born to.
I love that. I always say to my team, stay in your own lane.
Yes.
Cart horses cannot pull a cart if they don't have their blinders on. They freak out and they just run because they just see so much distraction around them and they can't focus on what they're trying to do. And the other thing that's interesting for me, as I'm still in the transition, you're someone who's out of, you have given me hope that I could get out of drinking the Kool-Aid, that I could get out of being a workaholic. And the other thing that's interesting to me too is I had this kind of vision that you talked about earlier of we're all in this kind of, we're all drowning. And so I feel like a lot of the time the Kool-Aid drinking is, here's a raft that someone else has built and everyone's trying to get onto it. when really they just need to learn how to swim on their own. That's the kind of metaphor I feel like. It reminds me of the trains in India where like everyone jumps on the train once it leaves and there's like people hanging out the windows and they're hanging on the backside of it, even though it's not safe because they think it's like, you know, that's where they have to be they feel like that's the only way they can move is to jump on this train. It reminds me of this idea that we're jumping on people's rafts that aren't even ours. And we're not either learning how to build our own or just staying a little bit still and just learning how to tread water. And that's what I feel, you know, that's the scary part is that you let go of the raft and you think, okay, can I float? Okay, I can float. Can I tread water? Okay, I can tread water. But it requires stillness. And that's the thing that I feel like for me with God in the moment for me is just like, you need to focus on the fact that, and it was so interesting. I went to church last night and this guy got up there and he's like, this isn't about religion. This is about your own connection. And I was like, finally, someone's saying that. And then he said, just so you know, you don't have to be perfect to show up. You don't have to be perfect to lead. I'm not a perfect Christian. I'll never be a perfect Christian. Like this is a pastor of like Hillsong Church, right? Like there's no dogma. I thought, what a great permission slip, you know, and I hope that what people get from, I don't even feel like I've tapped your knowledge because I haven't, but the thing that I guess I've gotten from you is like, this is about you learning how to tread water. This is about you learning how to float on your back. And when you're floating, enjoy the leaves above you.
Yes. Let there be joy. Yeah.
There's just not enough joy.
Joy. That's part of the process is that, and that's honestly the most surprising part about it.
Yes.
Is just that, oh my gosh, this was supposed to be joy? Like for real? Like I was so afraid of this because I thought it would be so much pain. And I'm finding the more I'm on this path of trusting my path and trusting the divine, the more I'm learning how much my system has been fully in resistance to love and joy.
Yes.
And that's the work. That's the only work there is how do we let go of a little bit more resistance so that we can let love in? Like, I don't know if I could share a vulnerable story to bring that to life.
Yeah.
But yeah, my husband, he has loved me so beautifully our entire marriage, right? And I have never felt worthy of it. Every time that we would go to be together intimately, there was this massive wall I had to break through. And I'm sure I'm not alone. And you and for everybody that's
listening, you're not.
Just a massive wall of shame. And oh my gosh, I hope he doesn't see this part of me. And oh my gosh, can I please hide this? And oh, how can we get this over faster? Because this is so uncomfortable. And I'm learning this is what divine love is actually like. Like it pursues us like this. It wants to just savor and enjoy us and have us just surrender to bliss and joy and love and peace. And we're terrified of it because it's so different from the reality that is in our society. But the more that I see, that I trust, the more I see like, oh my gosh, it's just surrendering into love. That's it. It's just surrendering into joy and peace. And just like my husband who saw beauty all along, right? It's just the divine has seen the same thing. It sees the divine loves and sees genius and magic and potent possibilities in each of us, something worth loving, something worth treasuring, and something worth delighting in. And so as we learn to trust, I think that's the best part about it is we get to reclaim our own lovableness, our own joy, really, and just being alive. So it's less and less about showing up to do the thing. It's more and more about, hey, from this space where I am feeling love and I don't feel empty all the time, how can I serve you? How can I show up in this space and serve and love? Really, that's all that service ends up being. How can I love? It's just
I love that. And I don't think you're the only woman who's ever struggled with intimacy.
No.
No, you're not. And there's would be a lot of men who struggle with it as well. Because I think intimacy, like I always say to people, intimacy is a litmus test for the vulnerability in a marriage.
That's so true. That's giving me chills. Yeah.
It's like, how much are you enjoying being intimate with your husband? Are you Are you okay with the lights being on? Are you okay with, it not being routine? Are you okay with it being longer than normal? Are you okay with foreplay? Like all of those type of things is ultimately about how comfortable are you with being vulnerable?
Yeah.
Because I remember Brene Brown talks about it. She says the emotion that people are most afraid of is joy, because you have to be vulnerable. And it's like, it's the most vulnerable an animal is when they're eating, because if they're out there and they're like, oh, I can finally eat, I'm so hungry, like I'm just going to enjoy this meal, and they're in this moment. You can't eat when you're scared. You also can't birth when you're scared.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be totally vulnerable and at complete mercy of your body doing what it needs to do, but you can't birth when you're not vulnerable and surrendering to that moment. I remember when I was birthing Ainsley, I had an epidural, but that was a long labor. But I had wanted it. I had a half strength, so I asked so I could still feel. And I remember saying to the midwife, I have to push. And it wasn't a conscious decision. It was a complete surrender to my body and what it needed to do in that moment. And I had to listen to it, because if I didn't, it would have been painful.
Yeah.
And so it's just the same thing. It's like that you just keep getting, the whisper keeps getting louder and louder and louder. And I remember in the last week or so, I've like come out, quote unquote. I don't even want to take that and make it, I don't want to play on that, but I do feel like that come out as like a Christian, because it was actually I was actually feeling so held back in my own path, because I felt like I was trying to make sure that I wasn't upsetting anybody by saying my religious or my spiritual belief, right? So I just love what you said, because I feel like intimacy in a marriage is a litmus test for intimacy in pretty much every aspect of our lives. Like if you're not enjoying, well, there's lots of other reasons, but if you're both showing up to enjoy that moment and you feeling like you're holding back, and you also can't climax either, right? Like you can't truly enjoy sex and intimacy with your husband unless you're completely in that moment. Your body won't allow you to. I didn't expect this to go this way on this podcast, but we're here now, so we might as well just go for it. But I think it's a really important conversation to have, because I think it impacts everything. It impacts your body image. It impacts the way that you dress. It impacts your faith. It definitely impacts your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of those things.
Everyday joy. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the big thing that I would say, the other permission slip that's the most important, is that it's a practice, not a perfect. Right?
Yes, definitely. Most definitely. Yes.
In the practice of vulnerability.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to show up to my yoga mat of life, and I'm going to be in the practice of this thing.
Yes.
But not feel like, oh, okay, I got to go be perfect at that, or I got to go figure that out. It's like anywhere that I'm at right now is just, it's degrees different. It's not like, oh my gosh, I changed night and day. But in those tiny degrees of difference, that's where more magic came in, more joy, more love. Like I feel like just those tiny refinements we make, or just showing up in surrender, and like I trust. I don't know what you see in me, God. I don't know if there is anything in here worth loving. Yeah. But you seem to think so. So I show up today in practice of trusting you in that.
Yeah.
But that's when God just floods in, right? Love floods in, joy floods in.
Well, I mean, the precipice of all of it is about loving. It's like unconditional, unrelenting, deep love.
Yes.
Show up however you need to show up, in whatever form you need to show up. And here's like a bucket full of love, and then there's a pool, and then there's an ocean. And that's pretty much, in my opinion, really the precipice of all of it.
I think so.
Now, Quinn, I want to ask you though, going back to your husband, now, so you've had this massive journey, right? So I feel like for me in my marriage, one of the things that's been challenging is I feel like I am growing exponentially, and communicating that through to my husband has been not difficult, but I've had to be quite intentional with it, because I'm learning how to ask for what I need. Have you found that for you in your marriage as well, or not?
Yeah, I think that my spouse has been, and I think this is kind of the plan of it, but has been my biggest growth partner. So that doesn't mean that it's been easy and that he's always been supportive. In many cases, it's been the opposite of that. But I feel that, I don't know, I'm just a big believer that we all have these scripts and roles we play, and that's part of the unfolding process, is letting go of the old script and the old role. And it's a process. It's intense. So yeah, what I have learned, my husband was just actually studying this not that long ago. Oh, I wish I could remember the name of the book, but anyways, in this book, he was reading about how the masculine actually delights in supporting the feminine.
Mm.
Like, it's actually such joy for the masculine to like bring out this blossoming in the feminine and to show up and just like, how can I love on you and create this beautiful space where you feel safe to blossom?
Mm.
So I think that, our society has definitely not been that way with the masculine, but as we keep coming into greater wholeness on our own selves separately, and then coming into greater wholeness in our marriage, that's what I'm finding, is that he wants me to voice those needs and he wants to be able to support. It really does bring him joy, but the way of it has changed, because I used to be very demanding and I used to be very highly emotional about it and stressed, and it would just stress and freak him out. And so I've really had to like own my own strength in order to then surrender to support, if that makes sense.
Totally get it.
Yeah, like otherwise I was just like, here's the broken bird, Superman, can you come in and fix everything? And instead it's like, no, it's because I am so strong that I desire this support, because, I'm really surrendering to all I can do is my part in my path. That's really it. So the other pieces I need support in.
I love that. It's interesting too, like as I've transitioned with weight loss this year too, my husband's like, I want you to go get nice things. I want you to like, it's such an interesting thing. It's not because he wants to like put me on a pedestal and he's objectifying me, but it's just exactly what you just said. Like, I'm stepping into my own power. So it's almost like he wants to celebrate that. And so before I would have seen that as like I kind of call it a patronizing wad, like, don't patronize me, don't objectify me. And he's like, I'm not. So I had always seen accolade and attention, especially from men, as just wanting to get something, or there was some sort of objective to it. But as you learn how to, stand in your masculine and stand in your feminine, and letting his masculinity come into my powerful feminine, not because I built what you say, thick walls are not strong boundaries, right? So taking the walls down and having boundaries which are permeable has been a huge change in my life, of saying, well, he wants to exalt me because he sees me now, or he is so in awe of what I've created for myself. So the last thing I need to do is to be snarky at him, like, well, you just want to get nice clothes because, you just want to, like just being that kind of snarkiness, being like, wow, I am going to go get a nice jacket because I love feeling good about myself and I love this thing about me and I love dressing beautifully. And he is seeing that and he is supporting that because I'm joyfully in my own feminine. So it's been this weird, it's like when you let go of that raft, metaphorically speaking, and you learn to float, it's like, and you learn how to do everything again. Mm-hmm. Relationships with my parents have completely changed. Yeah. Totally changed. Like on every ounce of how I view my parents, how I relate to my parents is totally different. My friendships have all changed. And so you have to know that it's kind of like you can go back to floating your back. Like I can do that well. And everything else is around you that's just kind of like, at least I can float on my back. Like, I'm just going to bask in that glory. But before we go, I wanted to ask you one question. One of the things that I love about what you talk about is the idea of being okay with free time.
Yeah.
Because we learn to float on our backs, and then we're like, oh, I should be fishing. I should be counting how many leaves there are. I should be seeing if there's rocks over there. I should be doing more. This idea of free time, how did you wean yourself off of needing to be counting the leaves metaphorically, helping other people out, just enjoying the free time? How did you detox into free time?
Here again, definitely a practice. I really leaned on Eckhart Tolle a lot in his teachings about presence during that time, just trusting that presence was enough. I had to really build up trust in that,
I
right?
love that.
And then that helped me be more okay with, okay, my kids, I don't have to be doing all these 20 things for them to get their needs met. The most important thing I need to be is present. My marriage, my business, like any part of my life in this messy relationship with my parents at this moment or something. Can I be with it? Can I bring presence to it? And, there was a part of it that I feel like it was a little stressful, but then there was this other part that was such relief, right? Like, oh,
Totally.
I don't have to do everything to everyone and always have a plan. But I did build in some like safety for myself. So I really had to let go of my addiction to my phone. And so I placed certain books all over my house.
I love that idea.
Then I would just pick up a book instead, and I had to be okay with, I might just read a paragraph, but it got me, so I was much more comfortable. I picked up, like, I'm not very crafty as far as like crafting goes, but I got like a Walmart embroidery kit and I pulled that out. And I was like, I taught myself to knit, like all these little things. So I was like, always had to be running and doing, but I found like, there's a lot of therapy. And like, even if I can't sit without anxiety just boiling through me around my kids, I could sit and clear my mind and be knitting while I was talking to them.
Yeah.
Right. And that helped for a season. That was dramatically helpful. And then now I'm in a space where I don't need the knitting. I do it for fun of it, but it helped wean me off of it.
How do you think it's, just as we end today, how do you think it's impacted your children, your transition?
Oh my gosh. I feel like we have real relationship. Like, especially as my kids are getting older and the kinds of things that they're dealing with. I mean, like my daughter who's 10, she's really waking up. She's super like aware. She's actually 11. That's right. She just turned 11. She's really aware of what is going on and what is okay and what is not. And she's like kind of hyper aware. But she said to me the other day, she was, we were really deep in conversation as I was really just showing up to be present with her because I didn't know how to solve and fix what she was talking to me about, right? So I just showed up in presence and all of a sudden she just burst out and she was like, how did I get so lucky to have a mom like you who doesn't make me have to be any certain thing that I can actually choose? And I was just like, like melting in a puddle because that's like what you're praying for,
Yeah.
But those moments would never have happened had I not done it in my own way, like what you're talking about on your show. It just wouldn't have. I wouldn't have been present enough to be there for her truly and to hear her without judgment and to just show up and just love her however she is, whatever she is. And that's where you see, love is where the miracles happen. Love is what actually changes things and changes people and makes life worth living. And so it's brought our relationships to life. I think I would be divorced by now for sure if I hadn't have made these shifts as well, because we're just enough different that had we not found this gear where we can allow each other to be each other and we can be present and love what is, it really would have divided us. We talked seriously about divorce when I was in corporate. And then it's been I feel like our relationship is our greatest treasure. So yeah, all around, I feel like, if I could summarize my work into anything, I mean, I'm a soul brand strategist. I love doing the branding and I love coaching people to help them know who they are and where their magic lies. But if I had to wrap it all into one thing, I would say it's all about living joyfully. And to live joyfully requires two main things. It requires meaningful connection. And meaningful connection comes from what we've been talking about today. It comes from a space of deep presence and surrender and just loving what is, loving who is, right? So meaningful connection. And then the second piece is soulful expression. Like each of us came here to sing our song. We each came here to bring our genius and bloom in our way into the world. And as we each do this, we make this world a better place. It brings healing to the planet. We solve the world's problems, And so I just feel like if you walk away from anything with this conversation, please give yourself permission for those two things, that to allow more meaningful connection into your life and to make more of a priority for it, as well as that soulful connection or soulful expression, that matters, that those dreams in your heart, they were placed there for a reason. And your heart and your soul are not leading you astray. So the faster we learn to listen, the more joy can just flood in. And it works out for everybody. It's a win-win. That's the best part about it, is me being in joy and choosing these things doesn't make less joy in the world. It multiplies it exponentially for you and every person your life touches.
Yeah. Quinn, you are a treasure.
Oh, I feel the same about you, Mish.
That your daughter saying that, I was like, oh, I think I'm going to start crying on the podcast. I just think if no one listens to anything that I ever say, if my daughter has a different path, I'm done. I did it. Yeah. Yeah, it's totally worth it. Like, you could be changing lives for me or for other people, but it's like, this is about them, this medicine man, metaphorically medicine woman, of like changing the generations of thought patterns, especially on women and entrepreneurship and what that looks like, and motherhood and relationships. I just think, oh my gosh, I am just so grateful. So Quinn, where can people find you? How can people connect with you? You've got a couple different things that people can tune into. I will vouch for In Flow and On Fire as one of hands down best things you could ever do for your business. It is like, oh my God. It's like an online, it's so freaking good. I had no idea what I was getting into. I just knew that I needed it. And I think everyone who's done In Flow On Fire maybe thought I was going to be like all just brass tacks business. And they walked away and go, wow, I didn't even know that I needed that, but I totally needed that, because it's just such a beautiful space of growing and massaging out all those boundaries. I just love In Flow and On Fire. So that's one of the things people can connect you with. What about the other things?
Yeah, well, and maybe I'm fine with In Flow On Fire being the focus. I have smaller pieces. There's definitely my podcast, Joyful Living, as well. And you can come to my website, QuinnCurtis.com, and find me on social media. But just the piece, just to give a little context for In Flow On Fire, is just that it's combining breakthrough coaching and energy work, and like this soulful work, like getting you anchored to your path and your joy and your genius zone, right?
Yeah.
But anchoring that with powerful, soulful, strategic branding and business strategy.
It's such a good, it is just so good.
Thank you.
It's just it's so good, Quinn. It's just like such a game changer. It's one of the best things. I said to you before we started, it's top 5 things I've ever done, hands down, 100%. So good. And you know why it's good? Is because you're in your genius zone and you're unapologetically showing up as yourself in that space, and you're not trying to make it something for someone else. You're just showing up as you, and people show up as themselves. And that's what I love about it. Everyone's building their own raft, basically.
Safe space for that. Yeah,
totally.
I think the work that people need is they just need a safe space to be themselves and to explore what their heart's saying and to follow their season and their path.
Totally. Well, Quinn, I adore you.
I adore you.
I can't wait to actually see you again, like in person. I can squeeze you.
It's gonna be pure joy. I'm super excited for that as well.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope that everyone who listens gets in contact with you. And I know that this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Better. We're doing it.
Awesome. Thanks, honey.
Love you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. If you'd like more information about myself, my journey, my public speaking engagements, or life coaching with me, please head to my website, mishpope.com. If you can kindly leave me a beautiful review on iTunes, I would be forever grateful. I can't wait to connect again in the next episode.